Hello there, this is Captain Crazy, and I'm here to do a introduction to the basic chainmail 4-in-1 pattern. Few things you'll need before you begin. You'll need pliers, snips, as long as you're at least as crazy as I am and do things partially from scratch. You'll need a coil or already cut rings. Important to know about pliers, find something that you're comfortable with. This does do a number on your hands, and for example, my wife likes to use these. She finds them a little lighter. I just think they are a little different and therefore fit her hands a little better. What you might also want is a pair of gloves, preferably with the fingertips out. That way it's a little easier to grab all the little rings. Just helps save your hands a little bit. Okay, so step one, if you're going right from coils, there's also another option where you actually buy wire and wind it around a steel rod and wind it with a drill. That way it takes considerably longer and doesn't really save you all that much money in the end, so I don't like to do it. The coils, however, I do find worth it. So in order to cut a coil, move this stuff out of the way here, I get a nice big bucket. As you can see, I already have rings in it. And all you simply have to do, snip, and you now have rings. I cut them 3 at a time. Some people prefer to cut 1 at a time. Just because this is aluminum, it's a little easier for me to cut, and I got really good pliers. You can use everything from wire cutters, which I don't recommend, but they do work, to tin snips, to end cutters. End cutters I found worked. If you got a really good pair, they worked well. If you didn't, after a short amount of time, they end up wearing out the blades a little bit. Like I said, these are very specific and meant to cut this type of wire. They can also cut stainless steel. They do dull after a little while with the stainless steel, so I mainly use them to cut my aluminums. These steel really hurts the hands. So again, all you have to do is line up where the last cut was, and you get 2, 3, or 1 depending on how many you want to do. Okay, so after you cut quite a few of those, you'll get a whole bunch of rings. Now, the next step we want to do is to get 2 bins. One, you're going to want to make the rings look like that, which is the open state, and the other, as you can see there, that little tiny crack where the ring used to be closed, or used to be open, and now you close it to seal the gap. That way you can put the closed rings and skip a step. Instead of opening every single ring and looping 1 in a ring at a time, you do it 2 rings at a time. The only time that's different to doing 2 rings is when you're starting a new row or when you're starting off the initial project. When starting off the initial project, you're actually going to put 4 rings on it, hence 4 in 1, so every ring has 4 rings looped through it. So as you can see, I got 4 rings on there. And our next step is literally just to and close. And didn't quite get it. Bit of an awkward angle here. Okay. So as you can see now, the ring is closed with 4 rings, which starts our basic pattern. So that looks something like that. So to continue on this pattern, what you want to do is, like I said, starting a new row, you need 2 open rings, or 2 closed rings, sorry, and 1 open ring. So literally just loop the 1 ring like such, and add the 2 rings on top. It doesn't matter if they're all to one side or one on one, like it'll end up in the end, and then simply close that ring. Now, as you can see, our pattern has expanded a little bit. I'm not going to pick this up to show you a little closer quite yet, simply because at the very beginning the pattern is finicky and it likes to move around a lot, and it's just extremely hard to pick up and get it to lie exactly the way it's supposed to. When I go to show you a little bit more on how to expand it, I am going to show you on a larger piece just for visual aids. But I'm going to show you one more row alongside here just so you get the general idea of how to start this. Again, because we're starting now a column, you're also going to need 2 closed rings and 1 open ring. So starting from the front, you're looping it through the 2 rings so it connects, and on the other side just put the 2 rings on. They'll automatically go the way they need to after you close the ring. And then we have a nice new pattern. As you can see, we're missing 1 to finish off the pattern, so I'll just show you that. Not doing a new row or a new column means you need 1 closed, 1 open. Here's where it gets a little trickier. You're gonna go through the side so that you're connected to both of the rings to the left, and then the upper ring, loop over, and then put your final ring over on the right hand side, and close. So as you can see, the start of a chainmail weave. So once you've worked at that for a few hours, or more than a few, especially on your first go of it, you'll end up with something like that. So for me, this would be about an hour's work. Do expect the first time that you do this, and for the first little while at least, until you get the pattern down and just the muscle memory involved with it, to have this take you up to 4 or even 5 hours to get even something this size, which is probably 8 inches by 8 inches, or there and about. Maybe a little smaller than that, but so that's your basic pattern. And then, as with the smaller pattern, to start a new row, because we're going to start a new row, so you have a row and you have a column, just like you would if you're working with Excel. So new row, 2 closed rings, 1 open ring. Here, I'll try to do it from the other side so you can see it. Underneath, oh no, I always do it from the other way. Underneath, behind, and through. That way it looks something like that. And 2 closed rings, I do it to one side, I just find it easier, and close the ring. One big thing to notice, the chainmail actually looks different, and actually it'll hang a little differently depending on which way it's oriented. So I like to have it oriented this way, where that would be the top, that is the bottom, and I find it easier to have the bottom rings that I'm working on pointing down, where the top is above the lower, and not as such where it goes down into. So that one, the row before it is kind of laying underneath and elevates the back of the ring. I just find it harder to work from that side. You might have a different experience with that. It's just my personal preference. It might just be because that's the way I did it off initially and that's the way I got used to it. But I have a very hard time working at it the other way. Best is just to try to figure out what you're comfortable with and what naturally comes to how your brain works. Everybody works a little differently. So yeah, that's the basics of chainmail weave. The other way, as you can't really see with the video, but that is my rows, and now my columns are the other way. And so it's easier to see like that. So as you can see, that way looks different than that. Okay. So I'll do a couple more rings here just to make sure we have the pattern right. So again, not starting a new row or column, so one open, one closed. Loop. Loop. And ring on. Close. One trick with closing is you almost want to close it or bend it past where the close is, because it does have a little bit of spring to it and it'll kind of correct. So kind of pull it past where you want and it'll move itself back. If it doesn't, then just use the pliers to move it back just slightly and then you'll get a really tight seal. Otherwise, that's all for the basics of the 4-in-1 chainmail weave. This is Captain Crazy, signing off.